In this video, I'm going to be talking about unexpected trends that are taking place in France. So as I watch a lot of videos from expats moving to France, a lot of them are actually talking about the culture difference between what they see at home and then what life is in France. In this video, I wanted to do the opposite and say, well, actually, these are the trends that I'm spotting as a French person happening in France. So for those who don't know me, I help expatriates prepare, create, and manage their business in France. The first trend I'm going to be talking about is public transport and bikes. And you might think, bike as a public transport? So hear me out, let's talk about this. So first of all, for some of you moving to France, the idea of taking the train to actually travel is probably not very nice. For instance, if you're in the US, taking the train probably wouldn't be on top of your list because it's going to be a long journey and not necessarily comfortable. France is actually quite a small country and the train journeys are actually quite enjoyable because they're short, the quality is good, and you're just going to relax and watch the landscape. And very often, trains are going to be playing to your advantage. For some of our customers who are applying for a business visa, taking the train enables us to open up the market by going to a different town. So for instance, last week, I was talking to a customer who is in my French business visa course, where I help people prepare their business visa and I coach them on the business side. And she's moving from the US. She wants to be near Bordeaux, an hour outside of Bordeaux, in the countryside, and she's going to be working as a photographer. She's got loads of experience in that. And because she doesn't plan to drive, she wasn't very keen on going to Bordeaux for the day. But actually I said to her, if you want an hour train journey from Bordeaux, you could hop on the train, spend the day in Bordeaux and work with your customers who might do a photo shoot. There's a lot of Americans coming to visit the vineyards, so you could go for the day, take a photo shoot in Bordeaux, or even go in Cap Ferret or Bassin d'Arcachon, the Arcachon Bay, easily by just taking the train. And then even if she lives in the countryside, she's going to open up a whole area and be able to work with more customers. Another example of this is a customer who's moving to Lille, northeast of France, and she's a UX designer. She moved to Lille because she knows that area, she's attracted to it, and the north of France is actually very good for e-commerce and tech because when the industrial activities went down, the local region invested heavily in tech and e-commerce, so it's always had a strong pattern about those type of activities. But for her, we open up her market by saying, well, actually, if you're in Lille, if you take the TGV, the high-speed train, you're 1 hour away from Paris. So again, you can go for the day and meet up with international companies, other companies that you could work remotely, and just for you, just hop on and you go there for the day. The third example is a customer who's moving from the US, he's going to Nice, and he works into the movie sector, TV sector, about doing platforms for live on demand. So he's moving to Nice because there's a heavy industry into the movie sector close to Cannes. So for production is good, but I said to him, for the visa side, we want to open it up by also mentioning Paris because in France, that's where the big activity is taking place. For him, he won't necessarily take the train because it's almost 6-hour journey, but he could fly to Paris for the day or go there for 2 days and just enjoy it. So the train is great in France and French people use it as well. Young people are going to hop on the train to go and visit their friend, to spend a weekend somewhere. And post-COVID, there's also a lot of French people who moved to rural areas and are still working in Paris. So for instance, 2 years ago, I went on holiday to Andernos-les-Bains, which is close to Bordeaux, close to Cap Ferret. It's a nice little village by Arcachon Bay. Really nice small village with lots of bikes, very good quality of life. And the couple moved to Andernos-les-Bains and he's still working in Paris, but he's going to Paris for a couple of days per week. So he takes his bike or his car to the local train station in Andernos. That takes him to Bordeaux, Gare Saint-Jean in 20 minutes. And then he has the high-speed train to Paris, which is a 3-hour train journey. So he's not going to go back and forth on the same day, but he's going to go for 2 days and still live in a very nice environment with a very good quality of life. So the train journeys and train is a good opportunity for you, even just to go and see your customers. Now you might say, Valerie, hang on, don't tell me that I'm going to go and see my customers by bike. So this one is not about your customers, it's more for you and for your quality of life. In France, a lot of towns, what we call communauté de communes, so it's like several towns who actually work together and compile their finances for investment into, for instance, recycling, schools, roads, and things like this. So they compile their finances, and quite a few of them are investing heavily into recycling and electric bikes. So you would see that many places you could rent an electric bike either for the day, so you know some of the apps, but also per month. So you're going to have a very very cheap monthly contract to rent a bike and be able to travel in your town. So this is a major incentive for those towns to actually try to take out the cars out of the city center and have a better quality of life. For me, when I see a town where there's a lot of electric bikes that are made for public rental and where the roads have been adapted for those, it's a very good sign of quality life for that particular town, because you can see the town is making some effort to make it better for you. And a good example of this is, for instance, towns like Bordeaux, Nantes, Rennes. Bordeaux and Rennes were just dreadful for traffic, really packed with cars, a nightmare to drive to. Those towns, for years, have had a real incentive to readjust the road maps and actually push the bike. So if you go to Rennes and you go to Bordeaux as a driver, you really pay attention. When I go to Rennes, I'm thinking, right, where are the bikes? Because they have the priority on many roads. Many roads have been stopped, and the aim of the town is to keep the cars out of the city center. And for you, it's really a great sign of quality of life. So when you move to France initially, you may not feel confident cycling, but after a few weeks or a couple of months, you'll see that it's really nice. I did the test this year. I live in the middle of nowhere. I live in a small town of about 3,000 inhabitants, but our peninsula, our commuted commune, have decided to invest heavily in electric bikes, and they're spreading them down now in smaller villages. You can sign up for a contract for 3 months. For an adult, I think it's 30 euros per month, and for teenagers, like 15 euros per month, hardly anything. So last summer, as my kids came back from uni, I said, okay, let's have a carpool. Whoever needs the car takes it. I work from home, so I don't really need it. And I took 2 electric bikes for us, and that was really nice thing. So I used it just to go to the beach, go to the doctor, go to the library. It's just really enjoyable, even in the countryside. And the last time I was in Paris, in October, I also noticed how it increased in terms of number of bicycles that there are. People do it as well in Paris for the quality of life, so they can go and pop to the library, collect their kids from the crèche or the school, and you see those weird and wonderful bikes that sometimes are pretty costly, because if you want to buy them, it's like 3,000 to 4,000 euros. So you have those cargo bikes where you could carry things at the front, or you have this strange seat at the back where you could have a couple of kids. For instance, in my area, if I go to the library on Wednesday, because that's the day that the kids are off school, very often you have parents with their bike who cycle to the library with their kids, a couple of kids at the back, and you couldn't really do it so well with a normal bike because it's uphill where I live. It's a really nice way to take your kids out, do their activity, go to the football club or whatever. So more and more people are doing that. And to me, it reflects the lifestyle, the quality of life, trying to get away from the car, cycle, and also get some fresh air. Let me know if in your area you noticed that there were also some electric bikes, or whether the town is investing into the roads to adapt for it. The next trend I wanted to share with you is about the recycling culture, whether it's personal or whether it's the local authorities. I'm sharing this one because a customer of mine shared with me that she was surprised, and she also mentioned it in YouTube videos as she's touring across France and looking for the place to stay. She was surprised by how much recycling is actually done. For those of you who are from Europe, you probably, it's not a shock because France is more like lagging behind compared to other countries. For sure, the UK and Holland were more advanced in terms of recycling, but over the last few years, France has been doing a lot of effort, and this comes down to local authorities who are investing to do more recycling and try to avoid for waste to be burned or buried. So for instance, in my areas, the local community commune, again, so it's like several towns joined together, whose responsibilities it is to manage local waste, have invested heavily into giving to people special bin for paper, so the yellow bins for plastic and paper. You could also buy a big composter for your garden. According to the size of your garden, you have a huge plastic container to do your composter in your garden, something you could buy from, but they had a whole education campaign around it by going to local markets and asking people to join or explaining people how it would work. And also for the restaurant, for instance, for the composters, because they can't necessarily have one, they also have schemes where they go and collect the compost from some of the restaurants or the waste in oil and so on. So there's definitely a big policy that is being spread out to improve the situation. Some regions are more advanced because, for instance, if I look at Brittany, they've been doing the plastic and paper for years. Our region was more behind, but all the different kind of areas are catching up. And if you bought a house in France and you went to the tip to recycle, you might have noticed, if you've been here for a few years, that the number of containers has been timed by 3 or 4 between the green branches, the metal, the composting, the furniture you could upcycle, the white goods. They really keep making more efforts to actually recycle more things. For instance, in my area, they've reduced the waste by at least 30% in 2 years, and they're down to 40 kilos per person per year. So definitely a big effort being done on this. Even from a personal point of view, if you've had guests coming to your home, French people or even teenagers, you might be surprised that people are making more effort. For instance, in my house, when my kids' friends are coming, even teenagers, and they go and bin something, they say, oh, Valerie, where is your paper bin? Or do you do the compost? So before they check something in the normal bin, they just double check with you where they have three bins, one for paper, one for the proper bin, and one for the compost. So it's just nice to see it's an education program across the country that people are making some efforts, and people, rather than bin, they're going to try to upcycle it or give it to a charity who will be recycling it. So there's a lot of ressourcerie. Ressourcerie is where we actually recycling items, and those tend to be non-profit associations that are going to collect goods. You can give them goods and going to fix it and then sell it to somebody else. So to me, the culture on recycling is both at a personal level and local authority, and that's a general trend. The next trend I wanted to share with you is about the increase of short breaks. So that's interesting for you. If you have a gîte or Airbnb business in France, we've seen a major increase in the number of shorter breaks that people are taking along the year. And this year, when I was working on my new course on gîte and Airbnb, so I was analyzing trends from major booking platforms, and they can see that indeed people are not going on holiday just over the summer from June till the end of August. There's more and more break on the pre and post season. So we're talking about April, May, June, and September, October. People are going for short break before and after the summer. So that's one of the major shifts. More breaks and shorter breaks. People might go for 2 or 4 days just to relax, breathe in, or have an activity. And you can see that on the booking platform, they also push you as an owner to actually have last moment deals to take on bookings. Airbnb has been pushing that quite a lot this year. What's also interesting is when we're talking about the pre and post season, we're not talking about people who are coming far away from France. It tends to be French people going for short break. So for instance, Parisian going within 3 or 4 hour drive, or tourists who are very close to France, so Holland, Belgium, Germany, are going to come over for short break in France. And there's been an increase in the number of short-term breaks for what we call Le Grand Ouest. So Grand Ouest is the northwest of France when you have Brittany and Normandy, and people are going somewhere where it's only 3 or 4 hours drive. So Parisian, Belgium, German, Dutch are coming for short breaks. These also tend to be people who are going to have a break related to a specific theme. For instance, they're going to come for a hike, they're going to come for surfing, they're going to come for biking. So as a gîte owner, try to see how you can accommodate for this. Post-Brexit, people want to have more break where they're going to really relax. In France, we've seen a big increase into la randonnée, so hikes, people going for walks, rambles, really increasing because people just want to have a mini break, fresh air before they go back to work. So how can you adapt for this with your gîte complex? And for some of you, it can be quite simple. So for instance, if you're talking about people going surfing, biking, the kit can be quite expensive. So you want to have a little shed that is nice and secure so they can put their expensive bikes on. You can also look whether there's some sport events. People are getting very keen on the marathon, the trial. So are there some of those events around you where you can also offer a stay and you can attract those people? So I'm going to give you 2 examples for this. I live in Normandy, I'm a mile away from the beach. For us, surfing, walking is a big deal. People come for the weekend from Holland with their van to actually have a surfing weekend, and they might come with their van, but might also want to stay somewhere comfy in a gîte or bed and breakfast. So those are potential customers. How can you accommodate them? Can you have a room where you can actually have their kids secure or their van secure where they stay with you? Another example is from my friend Guylaine, who has a gîte complex close to the seaside, and her gîte is actually by a walking path. So where I live, Cotentin is like a peninsula, and there's a path called Sentier des Douaniers, and basically used to be the customs path where they were checking for boats trying to bring in tobacco and alcohol without paying taxes a long time ago. So it's called Sentier des Douaniers, and many people come and do that sentier. So they might come from 1, 2 days or 5 days to do the whole trip, because in 5 days you're going to go from having major sand dunes and large bay with beautiful sand to having granite coast that looks like island, to then being more on the fishing coast on the east. So in one weekend, you're going to see different sceneries. It's really nice. So she actually opened up some of her rooms specifically for walkers and people cycling on those themes. And she called it the GR223, which is the name of the path. She called it the Ramblers Room or the Biking Room, and she's adapting how she's hosting them to answer their demands, their needs, the specific needs as walkers, as bikers. That's been very popular. So ask yourself, in my area, are there people coming for a short break? Which kind of theme activity are they doing? And could I accommodate this? And the last one I wanted to share with you is third places and circular economies. So third places, don't know what the translation would be in English, but it's called les tiers-lieux. So les tiers-lieux has been a trend in France where all premises that might have been abandoned actually being brought back to life. And this is where we have a mixture of businesses, art, and events. So these buildings are being brought back to life. It could be an old hospital, it could be an old plant that the local community wants to restore, and they're going to bring in people from very different backgrounds. So we're going to have businesses, startups, young businesses, we're going to have researchers, and we're going to have artists, and they kind of mix together. So those places become third places, a buoyant area where you might have some events, some conferences, and those places generate creativity because of the mixture of different profiles. So those are very popular. They're called les tiers-lieux, and it's a sign that your area is actually quite innovative or attractive because they're being original in the way they're thinking. If I give you a few examples of those places, so that could be, for instance, Darwin in Bordeaux, Grand Control in Gare de Lyon in Paris, La Cité Fertile, or it could be in Nantes, Le Grand Bain or Solilab. So sometimes it's businesses, sometimes it's more like social initiatives that are being brought back and also promoting short cycle. So they're quite interesting because it shows how out of the box the area is actually thinking. The other one is the circular activities, where basically they're trying to promote short circle by buying products, selling products that are made in your area. An example of this is if your kids are going to school, primary school, college, lycée, if you look at the canteen, quite often about 30% of the produce that are being bought by the canteen have to be bought locally by local farmers. So it could be meat, it could be dairy, or it could be organic farms. So that's a very good example of this. Another example is something called AMAP. So AMAP is like an association of producers. It could be farmers doing vegetables, dairy products, meat, and they're going to work together in this organization. And this is where you can go and buy some organic produce. But basically, it's the different producers are going to be combining together so you can have a good choice of product and have a real basket of fruit, vegetables, and meat, often organic. The last one is also Ressourcerie is often a non-profit reinsertion organization where you're going to give some items that you don't need in your house. So you don't need a table, you don't need a coffee machine, you don't need a washing machine, you give it away, and they're going to fix it if it's broken and then sell it back, and the profit will be used to make that non-profit association work and pay for the salary. So those are becoming popular. Buying second-hand items isn't because you have a poor budget, it's because you are making an effort, as we were talking about earlier about the environment or the economy, to actually use existing products rather than buy brand new. So those were the changes I've noticed as a French person living in France. Let me know whether you've noticed those trends or whether there are some other trends that you've noticed if you've been here for a few years, and then share them with us below because I'd be interested to hear about those trends you have noticed or to have your point of view on those I've shared with you today. And then you might want to watch this next video, which is about the trends I've noticed on expats moving to France in 2025, 2026. So this one is more about what's happening, what are the trends taking place for expats who decide to move to France.